Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, I am calling live from my car because I was supposed to get home in time to have this session, or to the office in time at least, and that didn't happen. So I'll be calling you guys live from here and sharing information about, well, inside what happened with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure and their 3 million or 300 million rand cyber heist. So in this session, in this very brief session, feel free to post questions as we go along. I'll deal with them as we go along. But the session really is focused on how the cyber heist was discovered, what the fallout was, what method was employed by these alleged cyber criminals, how the government responded to it, and the quality of their response, then the broader public's reaction, as well as key legal questions and some insights from me and my team of IT lawyers, general forensics, digital forensics experts, and IT and infosec experts within some of the leading South African enterprises. So to get you started, this is a really curious unfolding of events because, as many of you know, there have been multiple instances of cybersecurity breaches which seem to be targeted efforts against destabilizing the infrastructure of the South African government, and in this case, particularly critical infrastructure. We've seen it across the Department of Justice and various other departments, and one of the key parts of this incident that is different from the others is how long and sophisticated it has been going on, and the fact that it wasn't detected earlier, and what that reveals. So I'm going to give you a timeline first of well, what's publicly available. They offer the details which are confidential, which uh, will be revealed as time goes along by the ministry. But for now, what's safe to say is that there was an internal audit that was initiated by the then Minister for Public Works and Infrastructure, Sihle Zikalala, and who's now the Deputy Minister. And so that investigation was started in around May, and it was well, not the investigation, the audit at least of the ICT infrastructure of the department. And in conducting that audit, the Zikalala discovered patterns of unauthorized payments that was leaving the department specifically. And think of it this way: there is an internal process within public sector organizations or public service organizations where there are rigorous compliance requirements, rigorous documents that need to be submitted. And in this case, essentially, those processes were either followed but with falsified documents, or the documents which were of valid companies were intercepted and then edited to divert funds elsewhere. And so what really sparked this internal audit, though, was based on feedback that the department had received from its key banking partners like ABSA and the South African Reserve Bank. Now, what the audit had uncovered was that there was a significant amount of money that was part of the cyber heist, but which equates to about 300 million rand or 16.5 million USD. And then also, what was revealed is that there was a significant incident that took place in May of this year, which which equated to the value of 24 million rand, and so or just under 2 million USD. And so based on that second, or not second, but really that significant incident, the minister, or the current deputy minister, ordered a full forensic probe into the vulnerabilities in the ICT system. But what's curious, or what I find really curious and interesting, is that while this has taken place, and while the focus of the audit is on the ICT infrastructure of the organization, InfoSec and IT professionals would tell you that information security at an organization consists of technical and organizational measures which need to protect infrastructure. And although the audit or the forensic investigation is focusing on the infrastructure as it is and vulnerabilities in that infrastructure, a broader part of the conversation which hasn't been reported on was whether the policies, procedures, and standards to which the department subscribed was effectively being followed and implemented within the department, as well as whether that implementation included training of the relevant team members. Okay, and so that hasn't been clarified. I've reached out to the spokesperson for comment, and I should have that information by the end of today. But beyond that, the probe for now, or the forensic investigation that is currently being conducted, is conducted by a series of parties, including Hawks, or the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, SAPS, the State Security Agency, and then various other experts in ICT and cybersecurity. Essentially, they are incident response experts who are trying to stop the incident from continuing. Then you have the investigation stage, which is where the digital forensic experts come in and investigate. Okay, we've stopped the incident, we've contained it. Now we need to consider what caused this, who are the parties involved, and how did this actually materialize. So what they'll evaluate is the different system logs. They'll consider when key staff signed into their devices, and that's why you'll see later on that actual physical laptops, 30 physical laptops of key officials were used effectively for criminal investigation. But the scope of this investigation, generally speaking, covers the causes of the breach and vulnerabilities, the vulnerability and susceptibility of to cybercrime of the ICT infrastructure. So here we're talking about how vulnerable the system is, and that consists of various assessments or risk assessments. And then when we're talking about susceptibility, it's the likelihood that the department would experience cybercrime, and the public sector generally speak. Another key point is also about the lack of staff capacity. So really what that is saying is it's the investigation is determining whether there were sufficient staff members put in place to actually secure the department's ICT infrastructure, people with the right information security qualifications and who have actually demonstrated that they can do that, as well as general weak ICT systems. All of this is important because it will influence any court cases that come up, criminal court cases, but also investigations by the South Africa's information regulator, which we'll get into a bit later. So one of the alarming parts, I'd say, is that this incident it took place over 10 years, an entire decade. I mean, so much happens in a decade. There've been an exchange of up until this point, there have been about 6 ministers fulfilling the role of the DPWI ministry, and which means that these attacks were, or these heists, these cyber heists, either occurred beyond the radar of the applicable rules within the organization that specify when an incident needs to be reported or audited, or, as the current minister, Dan McPherson, has suggested, there is collusive behavior going on between inside officials and external actors that resulted in this over years. And so, really, what that has resulted in, at least for now, the fallout is that 4 officials have been suspended on what's known as precautionary suspension. In other words, pending an investigation, they are suspended from working for the department, using its devices, etc. And what's probably a key factor or indicator here as well is that The officials suspended included 3 senior managers and 1 middle manager. So it happened across the ManCo, or the management committee of the department. And it's the fact that there were these key officials. It makes sense if we're making if we're drawing conclusions. It's probable that they worked together to facilitate that, but that needs to be determined by a court. And that's why you've noticed I don't mention the word an actual cybercrime. A cybercrime has been committed, because only once it's been determined that they're guilty of cybercrimes by a court, then it will be deemed a cybercrime effectively. So another consideration is the impact on creditors that the heist had, and that really meant that part of the investigation meant that they needed to take a snapshot of the department's financial systems to see what has happened. And so that included looking from a financial perspective at the transactions that took place. And you can see from an auditing perspective, this doesn't only require digital forensic skill set in the form of actually understanding what happened from a technical perspective, but it also requires understanding and insights from a financial perspective. Um, and so that is what is currently being conducted. It is a task team that's involved, given the sophistication of what's happening. But for now, the government has reassured us that everything's going as planned. A question that has come up pretty often not pretty often, but recently, since the reporting of the incident, is it's still being determined whether ministers, the past 6 ministers of the DPWI, were aware of the ongoing heist, and whether it was just not a priority to resolve, or whether they had to prioritize other areas of national importance, or whether they were completely unaware because of how sophisticated this attack was, and that there was a lack of visibility over from a global perspective. And I mean global as in the entire department, of its infrastructure, of the events that take place from a financial perspective. Now, what is interesting, or further interesting, um, is that the country, South Africa, has a standard for minimum information security standards. It's called MIS, Minimum Security Standards, but it's predated. It's from the 90s, and there are various other global standards which have emerged, and other countries within the global South and the global North, where we could learn lessons. And so my view, or my perspective, is that from this, it's a clear indication that we need an update of InfoSec standards. We also need to rely on what's happening abroad to figure out whether whether we can learn any lessons from what has happened across the board. And given the fact that South Africa has the highest cybersecurity incidents in Africa, it makes sense that money is put behind this. But this doesn't only have to be from the public sector's perspective. It could consist of PPI, so public-private sector partnerships or initiatives where they work together to enhance the government's cyber posture. And part of this, or one of the questions that has also come up, is, well, what about the Cybercrimes Act? Shouldn't it have prevented that? But no, the Cybercrimes Act is focused on the actual criminal activity. It doesn't deal with cybersecurity at all. And so the question really has become whether the cybersecurity bill should be pushed up or rushed up by government, and whether the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act should be put in place because of what has happened. Other regulatory concerns have really been about, okay, so has this been reported to the regulator? Have data subjects been alerted that have been impacted? Who had access to the financial systems and data? Were employees trained on reporting the security compromises? And how were manipulated invoices actually manipulated? Was it using the actual accounting system or another tool? Then, under the Cybercrimes Act, the question is there unlawful access? Is it cyber forgery, unlawful destruction, cyber fraud as well? And what are the likely consequences? Because the Cybercrimes Act not only holds the actual cyber criminal accountable once it's been proved, it could also fine organizations. And based on my interpretation of the law, it is the board of directors ordinarily that's responsible. So effectively, in a departmental public sector context, it would be the minister and cabinet responsible for that. Then also under the Public Finance Management Act, there are various controls which should have been followed, and it needs to be investigated, as well as anti-bribery and corruption laws. Now, one other point that I wanted to mention over here was also that the the DPSA, so the Department of Public Service and Administration, released two directives which are applicable. The one is the Public Service Information Security Directive, and the other is the Cloud Computing Directive in the public service. And they speak at length to information security. And cloud computing. So it's worth considering them. Also, check the post that I have shared about the incident. There, it will specifically direct you to those directives. Okay, to end off, I just wanted to, well, before I take any questions, to end off, what I wanted to say was I've spoken to the rest of my team. I've spoken to digital forensic experts. I've spoken to cybersec experts and a few of the organizations that typically handle these types of incidents. And really, they have their conclusion or their initial assessment is that it is definitely an insider threat combined with weak cybersecurity infrastructure, a lack of monitoring and audits, and then insufficient training and awareness. If these events would typically happen with another organization or department anywhere in the globe, these are the likely causes. Now, it may not be the case, but it points in that direction. The likely investigation process that will continue will consist of both forensic and financial analysis of the departments. They'll look at server logs, transaction records, as well as seized devices, and they could potentially use AI-based solutions to actually support their initiatives. There'll obviously be interviews and interrogations taking place. I don't know if you noticed that the previous Public Works Minister, Patricia DeLille, who was the minister, let me just check, from May 2019 until March 2023, once, as a previous minister of public works, would like to meet with the current minister to have discussions about how this could have materialized. There'll also be collaboration with various cybersecurity experts and then also financial ones. My recommendation really is the immediate actions that need to be taken is there needs to be a strengthening of financial controls and ICT controls. The department needs to start procuring upgrades in their ICT infrastructure, as well as embed employee training programs in this regard, as well as figure out what cyber breach detection systems that they could use, such as intrusion detection systems from companies like Things Applied Research, or security information and event management solutions from other companies. So I know I've given you a lot of information, but I needed to package all of that together and give you insights into what's actually happening. I see there is a comment in the chat, which I'll bring up on the screen, which we can address going forward. Most entities in SA don't have minimum information security requirements. If we do not have them, if they do not have them, they're not effective. But also it goes back to the effective cyber regulations, of which I'm not confident about that South Africa will actually impose. And might actually be the root of problem. So I agree that regulation plays a key role in this, but it's also the one element which nobody's actually been speaking about in the news and nothing's been reported on this is that we do not have a culture of cybersecurity in public sector organizations. Uh, Security and security of data, whether in physical form or in digital form, that culture of keeping data secure. And I'm not talking about private in the sense of privacy. I'm talking about any data that has value, to keep that secure. That isn't within the culture. But otherwise, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the session. Feel free to pop further questions in the chat and we'll take it from there. Otherwise, have a lovely afternoon. Check out the article for more information and I'll be in touch.